You ever notice this? People keep telling you just be happy, like it's a switch you can turn on. But real life doesn't work like that. You've got bills, stress, random bad days, and somehow you're still supposed to feel great all the time? Yeah, doesn't make sense. That's exactly why I picked up this book, Joyful Anyway, because it doesn't tell you how to become a perfectly happy person. It talks about something way more real, how to still enjoy your life even when things are messy, stressful, and not going your way. And honestly, that's a lot more useful. So in this video, I'm going to break down the key ideas from this book, not in a textbook summary way, but in a way that actually makes sense in real life.
All right, let's be real for a second. You ever feel like you're doing everything you're supposed to do, but it still doesn't feel right? Like you're working, paying bills, handling your responsibilities, trying to keep your life together, and yet there's this low-level feeling in the background that just won't go away. Not full-on sadness, not even something you can clearly explain, just something feels off. And what makes it worse is, technically, your life isn't even that bad. You've got things going for you. You've made progress. Maybe you're even living a life you once wanted. So now you're stuck in this weird spot where you can't even complain properly. Because if you say, "I'm not happy," there's always someone ready to remind you, "Come on, you have so much to be grateful for." And yeah, they're not wrong, but that doesn't actually fix the feeling, does it? That gap between how your life looks on paper and how it actually feels to live it, that's what we're talking about today. And that's exactly why I started reading this book, Joyful Anyway. Because it doesn't pretend that life is supposed to feel amazing all the time. It doesn't sell you that usual idea of happiness. You know the one. Work hard, get your life together, fix your problems, and then you'll finally be happy. That's the script most of us are following, whether we realize it or not. And at first, it kind of makes sense. Of course, you think, once I get there, I'll feel better. Once I earn more money, once I figure out my career, once things calm down, once I fix whatever's stressing me out right now, then I'll relax, then I'll enjoy life, then I'll be happy. But here's the problem. Have you noticed that once I get there keeps moving? You hit one goal, and suddenly there's another one. You solve one problem, and a new one shows up. You finally get some breathing room, and your brain finds something else to worry about. It never actually ends. There is no point where life just goes, "All right, everything's handled now. You can chill." That moment doesn't exist. But we keep acting like it does. We keep thinking happiness is something waiting for us on the other side of everything being sorted out. And that's where things start to fall apart. Because if your definition of happiness is no stress, no problems, no bad days, then yeah, of course you don't feel happy. You've set the bar at something that real life can't deliver. And it's not your fault, by the way. This idea is everywhere. You see it on social media, people posting the highlights, the wins, the clean, edited version of their lives. Everything looks put together. Everything looks calm. Everything looks figured out. And even if you know it's not 100% real, it still messes with you a little. Because now, not only are you dealing with your own life, you're also comparing it to a version of life that doesn't even exist. So you start thinking, why does everyone else look like they've got it together, and I still feel like this? But here's the truth nobody really says out loud. They don't have it together either. They just have better lighting. everyone is dealing with something: stress, doubt, uncertainty, stuff not going the way they planned. That's just part of being alive. But we've somehow convinced ourselves that those things are signs that something is wrong. That if you feel anxious or tired or unsure, you must be doing life wrong. So what do? We try to fix it. We try to solve our way into happiness. We think, if I just work on myself more, if I become more disciplined, more positive, more productive, then eventually I'll reach this state where everything feels right. But here's the thing this book points out, and it's a bit uncomfortable to hear. You might not be able to fix your way into happiness, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the whole idea of fixing everything first is the problem. Life isn't a checklist you complete and then unlock happiness at the end. It doesn't work like that. There will always be something unfinished, something uncertain, something slightly out of place. And if you're always waiting for those things to disappear, you're going to be waiting forever. So the question shifts. Instead of asking, when will everything finally feel right, you start asking, what if things never feel completely right and I still have to live my life anyway? That's a very different question, and honestly, a much more useful one. Because now, instead of chasing this perfect future version of life, you start looking at what's already here. The messy version, the imperfect version, the real version. And you ask, is it possible to feel okay, even like this? Not amazing, not perfect, just okay. And maybe even at times actually good. Even with the stress, even with the unfinished stuff, even with the doubts. That idea that you don't need to eliminate everything negative to have a life that feels worth living, that's the shift this whole book is built on. And once you start thinking this way, something interesting happens. You stop putting your life on hold. You stop waiting for permission to enjoy it. You stop telling yourself, I'll relax later, I'll be happy when, I'll feel better once everything is sorted. Because deep down you realize that once everything is sorted version of life is not coming. But that doesn't mean your life is broken, it just means you've been aiming at the wrong target. So instead of trying to build a perfect life, maybe the goal is simpler than that. Build a life you can actually live with. One where things aren't perfect, but they're real. One where you still have problems, but they don't completely control you. One where you don't feel amazing all the time, but you're not constantly waiting for life to start either. That's a very different way of looking at things, and it's a lot closer to how real life actually works. And this is just the starting point. Because once you let go of that old idea of happiness, a lot of the pressure you've been carrying starts to loosen a bit. Not disappear, but loosen. And that alone can make a bigger difference than you'd expect.
So here's something a lot of people don't realize they're doing. They're not actually living their life right now. They're waiting. Waiting for things to calm down, waiting to have more time, waiting to feel more in control, waiting for that moment where everything finally makes sense. And in their head, it sounds reasonable. Let me just get through this phase first. Things are a bit messy right now. I'll deal with myself later. Once I sort this out, then I'll relax. But here's the problem. That later never really shows up. It just keeps moving. You finish one stressful period, and another one begins. You solve one issue, and something else pops up. You finally get a bit of space, and your brain fills it with new worries. It's like life keeps refreshing the problem list, and without realizing it, you get stuck in this pattern, always preparing to live,
but never actually living. And it doesn't feel like you're doing anything wrong, because on the surface, it looks responsible. You're handling your responsibilities, you're staying on top of things, you're being productive. But underneath all that, you're constantly postponing your own life. You're treating enjoyment like a reward that you have to earn after everything is done. But think about that for a second. When is everything ever done? When do you reach that point where there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to worry about, nothing demanding your attention? It doesn't happen. There is no clean finish line in real life. There's always something slightly off, something unfinished, something uncertain, something that could be better. And if your rule is, I'll relax when everything is sorted, then what you're really saying is, I'll relax never. And yeah, that sounds harsh, but if you look at how most people live, that's basically what's going on. They keep pushing their life forward into the future. I'll enjoy it later. I'll take care of myself later. I'll slow down later. But later is just another version of not now. And the scary part is, you can spend years like that, always almost there, always close to that version of life where things feel better, but never actually stepping into it. And this is exactly what Joyful Anyway calls out. It points out that this idea of a perfect moment to finally live is basically an illusion, because life doesn't pause while you're preparing for it. It's happening the whole time, right now, in the middle of your messy schedule, in between your responsibilities, during the parts you keep trying to get through. That's your life, not the version you're imagining for later, this one. And here's where it gets a bit uncomfortable. If you keep waiting for the perfect conditions, you don't just delay your happiness, you train yourself to ignore the life you already have. You get so used to thinking, this isn't the real part yet, that you stop noticing what's actually here. Small moments, small breaks, small bits of enjoyment. They don't register because they don't match that big ideal happiness you've been holding in your head. So they get dismissed over and over again. And eventually, life starts to feel like one long stretch of not yet, not there yet, not ready yet, not good enough yet. And that's exhausting, because no matter how much progress you make, it never feels like it counts. Now here's the shift this part is trying to make. Instead of asking, when can I finally start enjoying my life? You ask, what part of my life is actually available to me right now? Not in some perfect future, right now. Maybe it's small, probably is. A quiet moment, a decent meal, a conversation that isn't stressful, 5 minutes where your brain isn't racing. Nothing dramatic, but it's real. And that's the key difference. Because when you stop waiting for everything to line up perfectly, you start noticing that your life isn't actually empty. It's just not perfect. And those are two very different things. Your life can be imperfect and still have good parts in it, but you won't see those parts if you're constantly looking past them, always focused on what's missing, what's next, what still needs to be fixed. So the goal here isn't to suddenly become super present or magically appreciate everything. That's not realistic. The goal is simpler than that. Stop treating your current life like a temporary problem to get through. Because if you do that, you'll keep rushing through moments that are actually worth something. Not perfect, not life-changing, but still worth something. And if you stack enough of those moments, that's what your life becomes. Not one big perfect experience, but a lot of small, real ones. And that's a much more solid place to stand on than a future that keeps moving further away. So yeah, you can keep waiting for things to settle down, for life to finally feel under control, for that clean moment where everything makes sense. Or you can accept that it probably won't look like that and start working with what's already here. Messy, unfinished, slightly chaotic, but still yours. Because at the end of the day, this isn't the warm-up. This isn't the in-between phase. This is it. This is the part most people keep skipping. And once you see that clearly, it becomes a lot harder to keep saying, "I'll live later."
All right, so let's talk about something most people are quietly struggling with: your emotions. Not the good ones, those are easy. I'm talking about the ones you don't really want. Stress, anxiety, overthinking, that heavy feeling you can't fully explain, the kind of stuff that shows up uninvited and then just hangs around. And the way most of us deal with it is pretty similar. We try to get rid of it. We try to fix it, control it, push it away, replace it with something better. We tell ourselves, "I shouldn't feel like this. This isn't normal. I need to get back to feeling okay." So we start looking for solutions. Maybe it's productivity. Maybe it's self-help. Maybe it's distraction. Keep busy, stay positive, don't think too much. Do whatever it takes to not feel that feeling. And for a little while, it kind of works. You distract yourself. You stay occupied. You convince yourself you're fine. But then, sooner or later, it comes back. That same feeling, maybe a little different, maybe a little stronger, but still there. And now it's even more frustrating because you tried to fix it. You thought you were past it. So why is it still here? And this is where a lot of people start to feel stuck, like there's something wrong with them. Like, why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just feel okay like everyone else seems to? But here's the shift this part is trying to make. What if your emotions aren't actually the problem? What if the real problem is your relationship with them? Because think about it. You're not just feeling stress or anxiety. You're also reacting to the fact that you're feeling it. You're judging it, fighting it, trying to eliminate it. So now it's not just, "I feel anxious." It becomes, "I feel anxious and I hate that I feel this way and I need to fix it immediately." That second layer, that's where things get heavy. That's what turns a normal human emotion into something that takes over your whole day. And this is something Joyful Anyway points out really clearly. It doesn't say, "Here's how to never feel bad again," because that's not realistic. Instead, it flips the question. What if feeling bad sometimes is just part of being alive? Not a failure, not a sign you're doing life wrong, just part of it. Like being tired sometimes or getting sick once in a while. It's not something you need to panic about. But we don't treat emotions like that. We treat them like emergencies, like something is broken and needs to be fixed right now. And because of that, we end up giving them way more power than they actually have. Because now it's not just the feeling, it's the struggle against the feeling. And that struggle, that's exhausting. So here's a different way to look at it. Instead of asking, "How do I stop feeling this?" you ask, "Can I still move forward even while feeling this?" That's a completely different approach, because now you're not waiting to feel perfect before you live your life. You're allowing life to continue even when your emotions aren't ideal. So maybe you're anxious. Okay, can you still go outside? Can you still have a conversation? Can you still get through your day? Not perfectly, but enough. Maybe you're feeling low. Fine. Can you still do one small thing, send one message, take one step forward? Again, not perfectly, but enough. And that enough is important because most people think they need to feel 100% okay before they can function properly. But that's not how it works. You can feel uncomfortable and still live your life. You can feel uncertain and still make decisions. You can feel off and still have moments that are actually okay. And once you realize that, something shifts. You stop waiting for your emotions to line up perfectly. You stop putting your life on pause every time something feels off. And slowly, those emotions start to feel less overwhelming, not because they disappeared, but because they're no longer controlling everything. They're just there, in the background, and you're still moving. And that's a much more stable way to live. Because now your life isn't dependent on how you feel in every single moment. You're not saying, I can only enjoy my life when I feel good. You're saying, even when I don't feel great, I can still have a life. And that takes a lot of pressure off, because suddenly you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to constantly optimize your mood. You don't have to chase this perfect emotional state. You just have to be able to carry what you feel without letting it completely stop you. And that's a skill, a much more useful one than trying to eliminate every uncomfortable feeling. Because let's be honest, those feelings aren't going anywhere. They'll come and go, different forms, different intensity. That's normal. But if you stop treating them like problems to solve and start treating them like something you can handle, they lose a lot of their weight. And that's where things start to feel a bit lighter. Not perfect, not amazing, but manageable. And sometimes that's more than enough.
All right, let's talk about something a bit uncomfortable. What if the reason you feel worse lately isn't because your life got worse? It's because your expectations got higher. Think about that for a second. Because a lot of people look at their life and go, I don't know what's wrong. Nothing is terrible, but I don't feel good either. And their first instinct is to blame themselves. I should be more grateful. I should be more disciplined. I should be doing better by now. So they push harder. They try to improve more, fix more, optimize more. But somehow it still doesn't feel like enough. And that's where it gets frustrating. Because no matter what you do, there's always this quiet feeling in the background. You're still not there yet. So what's going on? Why does it feel like the better your life gets, the worse you feel about it? Here's one big reason. The standard you're comparing yourself to isn't real, and it's constantly being updated. Every single day, you're exposed to people who seem to be more successful, more put together, more confident, more on track. You scroll for 5 minutes, and suddenly your normal life starts to feel small, even if nothing actually changed. Your job is the same, your income is the same, your progress is real. But now it doesn't feel that way. Because you're no longer comparing your life to where you were before, you're comparing it to a highlight reel of everyone else's. And that comparison, it's endless. Because there's always someone ahead, always someone doing better, always someone who looks like they figured it out. So the target keeps moving, and without realizing it, you start playing a game you can't win. Because even when you improve, the standard rises with you. You get a better job, now you see people earning more. You get in better shape, now you see people in peak condition. You become more productive, now you compare yourself to people doing even more. There's no finish line, just a constant upgrade of what good enough is supposed to look like. And that does something to your brain. It quietly convinces you that wherever you are right now isn't enough. Not yet. Not impressive enough, not successful enough. And over time, that becomes your default setting. Even when things are actually going well, even when you've made real progress, it doesn't land, it doesn't register, because your brain is already focused on what's missing, what's next, what's still not right. And that creates this weird situation where your life improves, but your satisfaction doesn't. Now here's the part most people don't question. Why are you using that standard in the first place? Who decided that this is supposed to be the way your life looks? Because if you really think about it, a lot of these expectations didn't come from you. They came from what you've been exposed to, what you've seen repeatedly, what you've slowly accepted as normal. But that normal, it's not neutral. It's curated, filtered, edited. People don't show you their confusion, their doubts, their off days. They show you the version that looks complete. And when you see enough of that, you start thinking that's what life is supposed to feel like all the time. Calm, clear, under control. But real life doesn't feel like that most of the time. It's messy, inconsistent. Sometimes you're focused, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't. That's normal. But when your standard is based on a version of life that only shows the best moments, your real life is always going to feel like it's falling short. And that gap, that's where a lot of your frustration comes from. Not because your life is bad, but because you're measuring it against something unrealistic. And this is something Joyful Anyway pushes back on. It basically says, maybe the problem isn't your life. Maybe it's the standard you're using to judge it. Because if your standard requires constant progress, constant clarity, constant motivation, then yeah, of course you feel like you're behind. No one lives like that, not consistently. So the question becomes, what happens if you lower the standard just a little? Not in a give-up way, but in a realistic way. What if doing okay was actually enough sometimes? What if a normal day didn't have to feel amazing to count? What if progress didn't have to look impressive to be real? Because right now, a lot of people are doing fine, but it feels like they're failing. And that's not a life problem. That's a measurement problem. You're using a ruler that keeps stretching. So of course, nothing feels like it measures up. But if you bring that standard back to reality, something changes. You start noticing what's actually working, what's actually improving, what's actually good. Not perfect, but good enough to matter. And that shift, it doesn't make your life perfect, but it makes it feel a lot less like a constant struggle. Because now you're not chasing a moving target. You're working with something that actually exists. Your real life, as it is. Not as it looks online, not as it should be, but as it actually is. And that's a much more stable place to stand. Because for the first time, you're not constantly losing a game you didn't even realize you were playing.
All right, so at this point, we've kind of broken a few ideas. We've talked about how happiness isn't a final destination, how you're always waiting for a later that never really arrives, and how your expectations keep moving higher without you noticing. So the natural question becomes, okay, if all of that is true, then what now? Because it's easy to hear all this and feel a bit stuck, like, so what am I supposed to do? Just accept everything and feel average forever? But that's not really the point. This isn't about lowering your life into something boring. It's about changing where you're looking. Because a lot of people are only looking at one type of happiness, big happiness, the kind that looks like, I finally made it. I finally fixed everything. I finally feel complete. That moment where life suddenly clicks into place and everything feels clear and settled. And yeah, that idea is really powerful. It's also the reason a lot of people feel like they're failing, because real life rarely gives you that moment. Or if it does, it doesn't last. So if that's the only type of happiness you're paying attention to, you're going to miss almost everything else. And this is where Joyful Anyway makes a really important shift. It basically says, stop waiting for big happiness to show up. Start noticing small happiness that's already here. Not perfect happiness, not life-changing happiness, just small, real moments. And at first, that might sound kind of underwhelming, like, that's it? Small moments? But think about your actual day.
Not the ideal version, not the highlight version, just a normal day. There are probably moments that don't feel terrible, maybe even slightly good. You just don't really register them as important because they don't feel big enough. They don't feel meaningful enough. They don't feel like they count. But here's the thing. Life isn't made of one big moment. It's made of thousands of small ones. Most of them forgettable, some of them stressful, but some of them actually okay. And the problem is, we've trained ourselves to ignore the okay parts because we're always scanning for something bigger, something better, something more impressive. So when a small, good moment shows up, it barely gets noticed. You finish a meal you actually enjoyed, but immediately move on. You have a conversation that's kind of nice, but your mind is already elsewhere. You get 5 minutes where nothing is going wrong, but you don't really feel it because it's not enough. But what if that's exactly where you've been missing something? Not in the big wins, but in the small gaps between everything else. Because those moments are there. They just don't announce themselves. They don't feel dramatic. They don't feel like progress, but they are still part of your life. And this is the shift. Instead of asking, is my life good overall? You start asking, is there something okay about right now? Right now. Not yesterday, not someday, not when everything improves. Now. And that's a very different way of living. Because suddenly, you're not waiting for life to improve before you allow yourself to notice anything good. You're working with what's already happening. Even if it's small, even if it feels insignificant, because here's something most people underestimate. Small moments add up. Not in a dramatic way, not like a movie montage, but quietly, over time. A normal day that includes a few decent moments feels very different from a day where you ignore all of them, even if nothing big changes. And this is important because you're not trying to replace your whole life with positivity. You're just trying to stop deleting the small good parts of it. That's it. And when you start doing that, something interesting happens. Life doesn't suddenly become perfect, but it becomes less flat, less like one long stretch of stress and waiting, and more like something with texture, ups and downs, good and bad, but not just bad. And the weird thing is, nothing outside your life had to change for that to happen. Only your attention did. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore problems or pretend everything is fine. That's not what this is about. You can still have stress. You can still have real issues. You can still want things to improve. But you stop letting those things completely erase everything else. Because before, one bad thing could ruin the whole day. One stressful moment would define everything. Now, it doesn't have that much control. It's just one part of the picture, not the whole thing. And that's a big difference. Because when everything feels like it's going wrong, you don't have much space to breathe. But when you can still see small good moments inside a messy day, you get a bit of that space back. Not because your situation changed, but because your perspective widened. And this is really what this idea is about. It's not about forcing happiness. It's about not missing what's already quietly there. Because most people aren't unhappy because nothing good is happening. They're unhappy because they don't notice what is happening, or they don't count it. It doesn't feel big enough. It doesn't feel like it matters. But maybe it does. Not in a dramatic way, but in a real-life way. So instead of chasing a perfect life that doesn't exist, you start building awareness of the life you actually have, one small moment at a time. And once you start seeing things that way, your whole experience of the day changes. Not because the day changed, but because you stopped overlooking it. And that's where things start to feel a bit more grounded, a bit more real, and a bit more manageable. which honestly is already a big improvement.
So, let's bring this all together. We started this whole conversation with a pretty simple idea. Why doesn't life feel as good as it should? Because on paper, a lot of things might actually be fine. You're moving forward, you're handling responsibilities, you're not in a crisis, but still, something feels off. And over the past parts, we kind of broke that down. We talked about how happiness isn't a final destination, how waiting for the perfect moment to finally live your life doesn't really work, how your emotions aren't something to fix, but something you learn to live with, and how your expectations quietly shape how you feel about everything. So if you zoom out from all of that, you start to see a different picture, not a perfect one, but a more honest one. And here's the part that really matters. A lot of people spend years trying to solve their life, trying to reach a version of themselves where everything finally feels right, where there's no stress, no doubt, no discomfort, no confusion, just a clean, stable, peaceful life. But the more you chase that version, the more you end up missing the one you're actually living. Because real life doesn't come in a finished state. It doesn't arrive fully organized. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It's always in progress, always a bit messy, always a bit uncertain, always slightly incomplete. And if you keep treating that as a problem, you'll spend your whole life feeling like you're behind, like something still needs to be fixed before you can really start living. But what if that's just how life is? Not broken, just unfinished, and not in a negative way, in a normal way. Because if you think about it, almost every meaningful thing in your life has probably been messy at some point. Relationships, work, personal growth, decisions you weren't sure about. None of it came with clarity from the beginning. You figured it out while living it, not before. And yet, when it comes to your overall life, you somehow expect it to feel completely under control before you allow yourself to enjoy it. That's a pretty high standard, and honestly, maybe too high. So maybe the shift isn't about becoming someone different. Maybe it's about loosening that expectation just a bit, not giving up, not settling, just stopping the idea that your life has to be fully fixed before it's allowed to feel okay. Because here's something important. You don't actually need a perfect life to have a meaningful one. You don't need everything solved to experience good moments. You don't need to feel amazing all the time to still be living something real. And once you accept that, a lot of pressure starts to drop. Not all at once, but gradually. Because now you're not constantly evaluating your life based on how far it is from some ideal version. You're actually inside it, living it, even when it's imperfect, even when it's uncertain, even when it doesn't feel impressive. And that changes the tone of everything. It doesn't suddenly make life easy, but it makes it less like a constant test you're failing and more like something you're participating in, one day at a time, one moment at a time. And that's really what this whole idea comes down to. Not chasing a version of life where nothing goes wrong, but learning how to stay in your life even when things are not perfect. Because that's the reality for almost everyone. People you think have it figured out, they don't. They're just better at living inside the uncertainty, better at continuing anyway, better at not turning every uncomfortable feeling into a reason to stop living. And maybe that's the real skill here. Not control, not perfection, but continuation. Being able to keep going even when things aren't fully sorted, even when you don't feel 100%, even when you're unsure. And if you can do that, life doesn't suddenly become perfect, but it becomes a lot more livable, and that might actually be enough. So if there's one thing to take from all of this, it's this. Stop waiting for your life to finally feel ready, because that version of life isn't coming in the way you imagine.
Instead, learn to recognize the life you already have, not the ideal version, not the future version, this one, the messy one, the imperfect one, the one you're actually in right now, because that's the only one you've got access to. And once you stop standing outside of your life, waiting for it to become something else, you realize something pretty important. You were never really as far away as you thought. You were just looking for the wrong version of enough. And maybe you don't need more life. You just need to notice the one you already have and let that be enough to start with.